back to iReport University. Now that you've been introduced to maybe 80% of iReport's features that you will be using, let's dive right in and actually modify a report. And while we're at it, we'll teach you about one of the most useful features that we didn't mention in the overview video. So we're going to modify this sales order report, and let's just rearrange a few things in the top left corner, and then let's add another column in here for the list price in case you're giving somebody a discount. You want them to realize that. So to do that, we'll go in and we'll open this report. So here we are in Fishbowl. We'll go to Server, Reports, and Sales Order Module. And there it is right there. There's the JRXML that we'll modify in iReport. But remember, you don't want to open it here because we don't want to mess up the actual default one that we're using. We want to create a copy of this. So to do that, let's go to our sales report folder. And there it is right there. So I'll Control-C, copy that, and move it to the custom folder. And remember, if you don't already have a custom folder here showing up, don't just create it manually, but rather go in Fishbowl, click your upload button, pick any report to upload, and that will generate the custom folder so you can then come and copy and paste it there. And here's the one we'll open. And before I do that, I'm also going to rename this file so that it will never conflict with the other one. Although really it won't, because this will always be in the custom folder, so it won't be a conflict. Now I'll open it in iReport. So let's begin by these fields. We can just kind of drag and drop around, but we need to make a little bit of space for them. So let's make the barcode a little bit smaller first, or a lot smaller. And let's say we just want to put the date below the order number. So we can drag and drop that. If we drag and lasso from the left, we can grab everything at once and scoot it all over. Notice if you lasso from the left side, it doesn't work. It only works from the right. We'll make those size match. Make our barcode fill in the remaining space a little better. And then if we wanted, let's say we want to take the color out of this. So there are two ways to do this. Notice that when I click on it, all the properties show up for this item, and I could go and change the back color if I wanted, use a different selector or something. But even quicker way is just to uncheck the opaque button, and that way no background color shows through anyway. So that's gone. And I can either save my changes, or I can hit compile, and this will create the Jasper file, which I can then load into Fishbowl Client for viewing. If I had any errors at this point, they might show up down here in the bottom, letting me know what I need to fix before I can finish compiling the file. For example, if I drag date really tall, so it doesn't even fit in the same band, you notice there's a little warning sign pops up there. And if I try to compile again, it tells me element reaches outside of the band area, and then you can go and fix that. Sometimes, by the way, you can double click on these error message and it will select the item that has a problem, and then you can fix it from there. Okay, so we'll keep it the way it is, and let's upload it. And if I click next, I could rename it at this point and click finish. And then that's the way it shows up. And since I didn't select a folder, it just shows up here down below. Or even better is if I click this top item here, I can rename it here, and then I won't have to rename it when I actually upload it. So we'll run this. And you'll see we have our new organization up in the top right corner. Next, let's go ahead and add that list price column. But you notice it doesn't actually show up on the screen. All we have are these purple and yellow things. So this yellow one, this is a sub report, and we'll explain how to work with these and what they're good for in a separate video. And these purple ones, these are all tables. So you can guess this top one has this top table with sales rep and payment terms. And then we have 4 different detail bands. And yet we only have one table showing up over here. So why? Let's find out. So if we click on this top detail band, that table there, if we click on the detail band itself, you'll see it has a print when. So if we see that this fishbowl installation is the United States version, this detail band shows up. Whereas if we go to this next one, you'll see that's for Australia, and the third one is for Canada. And let's just say we're not going to work with Canada and Australia with these ones, so I'm just going to right click and delete these 2 bands. Because then we won't have them kind of cluttering up our screen. And this third one, this is the actual payment table. We don't have any payments. We don't have that turned on, so we'll leave that one as is. Okay, so here's our table, and if we click on it, it will take us inside the table, and here's where those items are. So here's where we'll add the column, but there's one thing we need to do first, and that is let's go create that field that retrieves the product price from the product module in the database. You'll notice if we click on the query for this report that there is no product price or unit price or anything in here. And that's because this main query is not what's used for the tables. So we'll cancel that. Tables must use a separate data set. And that's what these are, what these little hard drive platter stacks are. So this first one, if we click on this and click edit query, this would show us the query used for this top table, sales rep, payment info, etc. You can see those fields down below there. And for the main detail 1 band, that one uses the item info, as does this summary table down here. You might be wondering how you know which data set a table uses. And to do that, right click on the table itself and click Edit Table Data Source. And right there you see there's the name of the data set that this table is using. So instead, I will go and edit this query by right clicking it, and we will add the product price. So let's see if we already have product in our joins. We don't, so let's add a join to the product table. And we'll do a left join so that some things show up which don't have product associations. Most of our joins are pretty simple, just like that, but you do have to get used to them. And then we'll actually add that to our select statement as well. And if we wanted, we could alias that list price, although price would be enough. And if you want to, you can type as list price or just leave a list price. And now we've got another field. And if I clicked read fields, it would read through this and it would generate that field for me. But I'm concerned that some of these things like these doubles might flip back to big decimals, and I don't want to deal with going in and changing those back. So I'm not going to read fields. I'm going to click cancel, open up this data set. I'm going to right click on fields. I'm just going to add this manually. If you ever do need to reset something back from a big decimal to a double or something, you just select it and then go select double right there. Okay, so now we have this field showing up and we can select it within the table. So let's add that column. So I'm going to do it right before unit price. So I'll click on column 7 where unit price is, right click that and say add column before. Now watch what happens when I do this. All these different table bands show up, and you can see by the adjacent cells that some of them aren't even used. So I'm going to right click this and say delete that, and that snugs back up. I'm going to double click here so that it snugs up and doesn't take up extra space there. Okay, and just to copy the style, I'm just going to copy this, and you can't drag and drop through tables. You have to click in the cell and then paste it in there. And let's rename that to list price. And I'm going to copy this field over so it already has my price decimal variable set for me. Control C, Control V. And I could drag that down into place, or I can just come here and say I want it 0 from the top and 0 from the left to position it that way. And if I double click here, it shrinks it over sideways. And I'm going to make this a little bit narrower because we're going to have to add some room to make this fit anyway. Okay, so here I've got it. It's 47 pixels wide. So right now, these columns we're already displaying, it's taken up the whole space. And iReport is not responsive, so you can't just make it flow to fill the space like on your phone. iReport was around a little while before any of that kind of functionality was needed. So we're going to need to find 47 pixels from somewhere else so that this will still fit. Let's take a little bit out of the type. Take 5 from there. And I can take some out of total price because I'm not going to have $1 million sales. I don't need all that space. By the way, these are both total price columns. One is for home currency and one is for multi-currency. So only one's going to show up at the same time, but I'm going to shrink them both down. Let's take 15 off of this so that whichever one is being used, we'll give that space. And let's do the same with unit price. And there are also 2 of those, one for multi-currency and one not. I lost track of my math, so let's compile this and see how well it fits. Okay, the main report has finished compiling. I don't need to wait for sub-reports to also get compiled, so I can just come and click refresh. And we get an error. Let's find out what it is. Click OK, click the server log, unknown column name, list price. And there it is. You'll see some of the formatting is not quite the same, so let's go and fix that. For example, this, there was a little white space. You can see that was not at the top, so I'll just type, oops. I could move that up with my mouse or just type 0. That'll scoot that up, and you'll see it doesn't have a line under it either. There are 2 ways to add lines and borders. One of them is to right click on any field you've got selected and click padding and borders. This is my favorite way. I think it's very simple, and you could just say I just want one on the bottom. I want it to be half a rule or 1, and you can choose the color you want it to be. But in this case, that's not the way these have been done here. So we're going to do it the other way, and we're going to do it on the table cell itself. So I select the table cell, not the field in it, but the table cell, and click padding and borders here. And then I'll select the bottom, and I think that's a half point rule there. Let's verify. Let's check it against this one. Yeah, so half point, great. And now that should match. Also, however, it's still showing the unit price. So let's actually change this field. So instead of displaying the unit price, and notice this has that home currency versus, some different settings to use. do you want to show the currency symbol like the dollar sign or the pounds or whatever currency you're working in? We don't need to worry about any of that. So I'm going to delete and scroll to the bottom. And here's my brand new list price field. Click OK, compile, and let's see that in action. Refresh the report, and that looks much better. Notice, however, that it doesn't appear to be showing according to the price decimal variable, does it? It's just a whole lot of zeros. And so the reason why that's not working is because when we added this brand new field, we just created it and pasted that name in, and we left it as a string, which is just a text field, so it includes all that. But what we really want it to be is a double, and now it'll format correctly. Like so. That's better. And if we check the B201 product, you'll see, sure enough, price is $25. If we save that as 2502, this gets reflected on the report. Now let's do two more things. First of all, you'll notice it's not quite fitting in there, so let's reduce one of these other. Let's reduce quantity ordered a little bit to make some room for that. That looks to me like about a dozen points. So we'll go down to 60 here. Notice under quantity order, we have separate columns for the quantity and for the unit of measure. You don't want to go too small on those. You want those to still be able to fit. That's better. And finally, you'll notice that if we click Modify Report, we've got a required field for the SO number. We've got all our optional filters and parameters, and we have this columns one, and this allows us to choose which columns appear and don't appear on the report. Let's add one of those for the list price column. So before we can do that, before we can add something for the print when, we have to create it. So we'll go back to below our query, and we'll click to add a new parameter. And this one will begin with the letter COL for column. This makes it appear in the column tab under Modify Report. And we'll say show list price. And we'll make this not required. And then second of all, we'll make this one a Boolean. This turns it into a checkbox. There's one other way to make it a checkbox for other purposes. I'll touch on that in a different video. And by default, let's put this on. So I'm going to type true for the default expression. Now, if I save it here, let's do this in two steps. So first, I'll go to my list price column. And now when I go to print when, and I go to my parameters list, you notice it's got fields, variables, and parameters all separate. So here at the bottom is my brand new one, show list price. And that's all I need to do since it's Boolean. If I just insert that, if it's true, this column will display. Print just means display. It prints it to the screen. And if it's false, then it hides it and everything collapses. So when you have a table, within the table, it is not exactly responsive, but more responsive because columns can show or hide. But if I compile this report right now, I have all the logic I need inside the table set, but I won't be able to do it. It will not show up in my Modify Report window because to show up here, it can't be down here in one of these subqueries. It has to be up in the main query. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to Control V there to paste it. So now it is also up on top. So it will show up in Modify Report, and then I need to get it to pass down into my subquery. And there's one more step to tie those together so that this parameter from up here in the main query will get passed down to the subquery. And there is a slow way and an easy way to do that. I'm going to show you the slow way first and then the easy way. So I go back to my main report. I right click on this, and once again I go to edit table data source. So here's, remember, that's where we figured out which subquery is getting used for this. And if I click on my parameters list, here's all the list from my top main query, and here's the matching ones from down in the subquery. So I could click add, and then in the top and bottom section I select this. So I scroll to the bottom and I say that one, and that matches up. And then if I click here and go back to my parameters, here's my list from my subquery, and I double click that to get that in there and click apply. And now I've tied these together. I click OK, OK, and now it'll work. Okay, that's great, but that's the slow way. Let me show you the fast way. We'll go back one more time to edit table data source and click on the parameters map expression. If you type that in just like that, report underscore parameters underscore map, you don't need to do any of this, because this automatically takes everything from the top query and links it to something matching if it's named the same way in the subquery. So we didn't really need to go in and do this one here, but I wanted you to be aware of how that works. And that's it for this video. Let me resize this barcode just to match up and look a little better. Let's review what we learned in this lesson. So lots of these fields you can drag and just move them around as you like. In this area, you can drag them from one band to another. That's no problem. Although if it doesn't fit within one band, then you'll get an error for that. And when you right click on things, then you can change the properties for them. And then when we wanted to add a column here, we went inside the table. Well, first we went into the query and added that field to the query because it didn't exist yet. And then we created a new column and we added that in there. And then finally we added a parameter to both the upper and the lower queries and made sure that they were linked together. One more crucial tip for tables: do not delete columns. Do not delete rows. So if I decide I don't want that column, do not right click on it and say delete cell, because something happens in iReport, it's incomplete, it doesn't delete it cleanly, and suddenly when you try and run it, you will get an error and it will say missing JR column, and you can't fix it here in the GUI. If you want to try and fix it, you would have to click into XML, and I hope you know some HTML, because that's what's used here, and you do a search. The message would say something like missing JR column. So you do Control F, type junior : column, and this, you can go through and find all the instances of this. Do your Control F to bring that back up, and you're going to have to know some HTML to find when it's missing, and it's usually one of these where it ends the JR column that it's not there. So don't delete those things. If you're ever concerned, you're making a change to a table and you're concerned you don't want to break it, you can always make a copy of it. Maybe we can add another temporary detail band to just store that in. And maybe for this detail band, we'll just set the print when to false, so it'll never actually show up and, you know, make things look funny. And that way we've got a backup. And then if we really break this one, we can delete the whole table. That's fine. And then we'll just copy our backup back in. And that's it. So good luck. Watch the next videos. We'll keep training you in all the how to use iReport, the ups and downs, ins and outs, things to avoid, things to do, and how to do them. And you'll be cruising along in no time. Enjoy your day.